Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
The next book from PM Power Consulting, 5 Tantras of Enterprise Agility, will be out very soon. Check pmpowerconsulting.com to get updates on the release date. This is a special conversation with the author, Paramu Kurumathur, and the product owner, J Veeraraaghavan, in conversation with Sivaguru.
Welcome to this special episode of the Software People Stories, where we have two guests this time, Paramu and JV. Paramu, who's the author of this upcoming book of 5 Tantras of Enterprise Agility, and JV, who has been the inspiration and, in a way, the product owner for this book. Welcome to the show, Paramu and JV.
Thank you very much for having us. I have done many podcasts with you, I think. Many meaning 3 or 4, I think, so far, right? And I've enjoyed doing all of them. You make things interesting by asking different questions, throw in a googly here and there. So I think I've enjoyed doing these podcasts with you, and I think I'll enjoy this also.
Yes, me too, Shiv. It's a pleasure talking to you once again on a podcast, and look forward to an interesting session.
Yes, but Paramu, this time, I think you have already thrown a lot of questions at the readers, because the book, when I went through, right from the probably one of the initial draft versions to the way it is turning out, I think you have so much of content there that every time I read, I probably get a lot more questions that I'll probably ask you some of them through this conversation. But the main thing that I wanted to focus on this time is, again, the people or the people story aspect from 2 dimensions. Now, one, for both of you, this whole experience of writing this book, whether that was also in an agile manner or etc. The other one is about, let's say, the characters or the contents of the book. So first, I'd like to hear from you, Paramu. After writing 2 books that have been published, how was this experience different?
I think writing any book is actually a kind of agile production, because you think of certain things, you add it there, then you go back, then you add something else somewhere else, right? And you normally always satisfy the customer being you yourself or your own conscience, right? Or your own, the muse in you or the creativity in you. You want to satisfy that, right? Therefore, whatever comes to your mind. Now, sometimes things come to my mind at night. Then I get up at night and send a mail to me. So I don't have a notebook nearby, but I have my mobile. So I send a mail to me saying, these ideas are here. So next day I come and put it in there, right? Into the book. So this book also, it was done in a random fashion. I didn't start from the introduction or start from chapter 1 or from the first value. You just put things in as they came along. You refer to various books, you refer to the internet, and then you put things in, right? And when you put something in one particular chapter, you remember that something else has to be done in some other chapter. Then you go back there and put that in there, right? There's always a network or a connection between various chapters. So you make sure that everything is filled in. In fact, I remember with the other book, my novel, I remember the publisher asking me or telling me that, oh, here is one particular thread you started in the 2nd chapter. You have not actually closed that thread by the end of the book. So there are so many little things that that happen that you have to remember to do. And sometimes the closing of the thread is done much later. Or you introduce a character. How do you make sure that character is useful somewhere? Because you don't want to introduce characters who don't appear anywhere else later. Even though this book, there are some characters like that. But in a novel, you don't want to do that, right? Yes, the book was certainly written in a kind of very agile fashion.
How is it for you, JV, being a product owner with a lot of these things evolving as they went along?
From my perspective, I think I wasn't clear about how the book was going to look like at the end, right? At the beginning, there was a broad manifesto that we had, Enterprise Agility manifesto that we had in our mind. So we had the 5 values. That was the only thing that we were clear about. So you may in some sense say we were clear about the epics, the top 5 epics. But what was actually going to go inside each one of them, a lot of clarity was missing in some of them. For example, we did not know what we were going to talk about in lean thinking when we started, right? Some areas were fairly clear. So, we kind of attacked them in the beginning. Self-organization was, we were very clear about what we wanted to say. So we actually started with that and did quite a bit of work there. And some things emerged even there. For example, mindfulness as a theme emerged in self-organization, somewhere down the line. So we could add that thing later. But aspects like experimentation and learning, lean thinking, there was much less clarity in terms of what we wanted to do. And many of these actually emerged only later in the game. So in that sense, value got added to the book in some sense in an agile way. Second thing is there's a lot of iteration that was involved. We were not getting everything right the way that we wanted it. So we would actually do something and then go over it again and then add more value there where we felt that value was missing, clarity was missing, examples were less than what we wanted. So I think not only a lot of back and forth, but incremental value that got added in each one of those 5, you may call it sub books, made it a lot more, you can say, agile kind of effort and very satisfying in some way. Because when we started, we weren't sure about what the final product was going to look like. The final product that we actually see today is something that I feel very happy about compared to what I expected in the beginning.
And Shiv, one manifestation of the fact that we worked in an agile fashion is actually, if you took the last value, lean thinking that JV talked about, how it was, just totally new. That chapter had the maximum number of repetitions, right, from the other chapters, right? Well, we're just trying to fill things in. Only over time did that chapter become unique in itself. Many a time, you found that whatever we are saying here was already said before in some other value, right? So it took a lot of time for it to iterate into this, into what it is now.
Very interesting. I think now I'm curious about all the notes that you might have made that didn't make it to the book. That will in itself probably be another book or a backstory for the book. That will be very interesting reading. But then one question that was triggered by what you said, JV, about the 5 values that you had. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to call the book 5 Tantras of Enterprise Agility?
Yeah, I will probably let Paramu share his perspective, but 5 values was the first title that we had in mind, 5 values of enterprise agility. But then the way the book has been written, the way we have approached the book through fables and bringing out value, through the use of fables, like the Panchatantras as the kind of inspiration behind the whole thing. We actually said instead of calling it values, tantras, maybe 5 tantras, maybe a more appropriate title. Maybe Paramu can throw a little more light on, considering the fact that he was the brain behind the way we actually approached the book.
Previous book was based on the Mahabharata, right? And the whole story was kind of woven around Krishna and Arjuna. In this particular book, I wanted to use some other setting, and therefore I thought that the best setting would be using fables from the Panchatantra to talk about the values and the morals, okay, of each value. I decided, yeah, Panchatantra is a good approach to do this. And then I found that coincidentally, the Enterprise Agility Manifesto actually talks of 5 values, and Panchatantra talks of 5 treatises or 5 books, right? Therefore, I kind of connected a value to a tantra and then called it the 5 tantras, right? Therefore, the tantra and the value got a one-to-one correspondence because of this. And the book is organized in 5 treatises or 5 books.
Yeah, can you explain that a little more? It sounds like Inception, books within books. What are these books? And I know that you also referred to some amber signals and all that. So how is the book structured?
If you take the Bible, each chapter is called a book. Genesis is a book. Exodus is a book, right? So I also call each of these sections as books, right? Those things can be actually read in itself on its own, right? Without having any reference to the others. So they are all fairly self-contained entities as they are, right? Therefore, so the whole book is divided into these 5 books, and each of these books is then divided into 5 chapters. And these chapters talk about how do you get to this agile internalization of this value. What is the culture and mindset needed to reach there? What is the kind of leadership role people have? And what kind of tools and techniques do you need for this? There are 5 areas that we look at for each book. That's the way the book is structured.
So JV, as a product owner, when you had the structure of books and then these 5 underlying amber signals or related to that and all that, was it becoming a little rigid for you to narrate something or explain something, or was that something that flowed more like one step after the other?
Shiv, if I can just interrupt here for a minute. See, within a book, these 5 chapters were actually JV's decision. So he is the one who suggested these 5 chapters. So we followed that to a T for all the books.
Okay.
So continuing on what Paramu mentioned about the structure of the book. See, basically, even though I kind of recommended a particular structure, the idea was around for different aspects of each value that we want to cover. For example, what do you need to do to get a value kind of implemented in an organization? So getting started. That's what we called it. And what we needed to do to get it done. Then we said we need to look at the cultural elements that are required. We said we also need to look at what kind of an organization is required. For example, the overall structure within the organization, the kind of roles that you require, etc., etc. And then we also said leadership, executive leadership is an important element of implementing any value in an organization, internalizing any value in an organization. So we said, what's the executive leadership needed? And we also said that we need the tools and processes and the ecosystem that you require for implementing any of these values. So we actually looked at these 5 different values, and one of the things that came out was typically what kind of challenges organizations face when implementing this, and how do they overcome the challenge. So the amber signals came out of that. They said typically organizations go through certain bottlenecks or issues along the way, and they find a way to overcome that. And if there is a way we can actually bring it out and warn organizations, they would actually see that as something that in some sense it's like we are helping them with proactive, you can call it risk management in some way. These are the amber signals to watch out for. And so if you think about this, when you start implementing something, you'll probably avoid some of the issues that many organizations face. So your path to agility may be smoother and much quicker. That's how we actually came out with this concept of amber signals. And even though initially we had amber signals at an individual, you may call it subsection or chapter level, we said that we should summarize it at a book level, because there is a integrated element about some of these amber signals. It's not like they are standalone. They kind of run across different dimensions of implementing a value. So we said we need to put the amber signals together for each book. That made a much better sense. And we also wanted to make sure that we gave recommendations to the readers and the people who actually are likely to take this book as an input for them to implement Agile in their organization. So I think that's how this whole thing evolved. And it was very interesting because it didn't, again, this is another way of doing it in an Agile way. We said we started in a certain way, and then we actually kind of grouped things together so that it was a much better presentation and appealed to the reader much better.
Yeah, that's nice. In all these lean startups, you talk about pivoting and then trying to keep the goal the same, but look at a different approach of organizing. But this structure seems to be fairly well thought out. That is, you have these 5 books and then the chapters underneath, the amber signals and all that. So from a reader's perspective, how do you suggest that one can A, read the book, and B, use the book, let's say, as and when needed?
Maybe I'll attempt first, maybe Paramu can add his perspective. So I think the great thing about the way I feel the book is written is that you don't necessarily, even though I still believe that if you read it from beginning to end, you get the maximum value. I personally don't believe that you need to do that because each book in some sense is independent. I can actually take self-organization and read it and get some significant value out of that, right? Even though there is some context mentioned here and there, so they may probably not understand the context, but essence of the value and the way to go about it, all of that comes out as, in some sense, in an independent way. The other useful thing is the amber signals are also presented at the end of each book. So if somebody wants to use a reference when they are implementing some value, for example, transformation leadership or whatever, they can actually look at the amber signals, top 15 or 20 things to watch out for when they look at implementing transformation leadership in the organization. So you can look at amber signals as a reference guide for you when you implement. Same way in the epilogue, we have actually summarized the whole book in terms of all the what you need to do and what you need to avoid kind of stuff at the end. So that's another thing that people will use as a good reference. But when you read the book from top to from the first to the end, the feeling is very different. So obviously, if there is a possibility, I would strongly recommend they read it that way. And it's not, even though it's the subject is not very light, the way it's been written is so light that if somebody wants to read it even at a stretch over 4 or 5, 6 hours, they should be able to get substantial value and feel captivating to read in some way.
Yeah, I agree, JV. I think, in fact, one of our guests also who read it had the same thing, that it's not light content, but it is light reading. Yeah, Paramu, what would you recommend?
Our colleague Shivakumar, he told me that he was reading the book back to front, right? So he's reading the last chapter first, then the second last chapter, etc., back to front. And he was getting a fairly decent understanding of what is going on, right? Because the last chapter or the last section is on remote working in the pandemic times, right? And the next is the epilogue, which talks of which gives a general, broad understanding of the whole book. As JV said, the story Alice in Wonderland, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. King tells a white rabbit. White rabbit asks the king, "Your Majesty, where should I start?" So the king says, "Start at the beginning, go on till you reach the end, and then stop." Right? So similarly, this book, at the first level, you can just read it from the beginning to the end, get a general picture of what is going on, and then you can go back to these different sections as you want. For example, if in your agile implementation, you are actually grappling with the area of leadership, you can go to that area, transformation leadership, and look at that. Or if you're grappling with the idea of how to organize yourselves, then you can go into self-organization. Right? So all these chapters, as we both said before, are kind of independent, right? So you can actually, in my mind, you can actually read the whole thing once and then use it and go to different sections for reference as and when you want.
Yeah, thanks. I guess this is also a sampler of how fables have been woven in. I like the white rabbit story. Which of the 5 tantras or values is your favorite? Maybe JV can go first.
I think one that I enjoyed working on with Paramu, and when I went through it again and again, the one that I enjoyed the most was the one around self-organization. 2 reasons. One, I think it's come out really well. With our own very rich experience in coaching at a product program level, program team level, this comes out very strongly. I think we've got a very rich experience in PM Power of actually enabling self-organization in many organizations, and that experience actually comes out. Second thing that we have covered is there are very new perspectives, especially such as those relating to mindfulness, for example, right, which you normally don't find in books on self-organization, but we have actually felt that mindfulness is an extremely important theme when we talk about self-organization in a setup. So we believe that adds great value to our readers. But having said that, the other area that gave me a lot of satisfaction was lean thinking, because initially it was a struggle. We were not sure how we were actually going to do it. But when we actually were able to get a lot of good perspectives and talk about issues of productivity, the way productivity is measured in organizations, and come out with a lot of principles and experiences in terms of how to improve the flow of work, that anyway contributes to improving productivity. I think it felt a lot of I felt a great sense of satisfaction in doing that, and we were able to share some perspectives and experiences from the open source communities. That was also another useful thing when we talked about lean principles, etc., etc. So I think self-organization first, and probably lean thinking after that.
What about yours, Paramu?
My favorite area is also, or the favorite tantra is also self-organization, because for one thing, that's the area I spent maximum time writing, and that is also the largest in terms of number of words, right? So there's a lot of stuff put in there. In fact, the section on culture and mindset, right, has two distinct subsections. One, as JV said, is on mindfulness. So that whole area of mindfulness is something which we added as a kind of bonus for people, right? This area of mindfulness has been vetted by our expert, Sheshar Hegde, right? So he went through that and made sure that it's all correct. Right? So we've got mindfulness there. And the other thing that I like, so it's a good area for me to actually understand, right, before writing it, right? So it gave me a perspective on that also. At the same time, I find that self-organization is the rule of nature. Our body is itself made by self-organization. So from the one cell to becoming 4 cells, 2 cells, 4 cells, etc., right? And then becoming a whole human being. It's actually done through self-organization. So it's based on chemical gradients and also how the neighboring cells behave. So human beings themselves and other animals are all made through self-organization. And even at a higher level, we find that birds swarming, right? Skylarks swarming, thousands of birds flying together, right? As if somebody is directing them. Nobody is directing them. They all do it on their own, right? It's all based on local decisions. Right? So self-organization that way brings together not only ideas from the natural world, it also brings together ideas from the social world, and also human beings actually self-organize around certain goals, right? So it brings in at the social level. Then also, as I said, it also brings in at the spiritual level, things like mindfulness and other things. Therefore, for me, I like writing about self-organization because it gave me different perspectives on these different areas.
As you were describing, Paramu, I could graphically visualize a time when probably with the help of AI, words or maybe letters organizing themselves into words and words into sentences and maybe books. How far away do you think it is?
I think it's possible. In fact, there are some already. I forgot the name of that program or that system. Okay, I think somebody has actually fed in some I don't know, 100,000 or 100 million or whatever inputs about plots and things like that, and it kind of churns out stories, right? So I think that the day is not far away when even for creative things, even human beings may not be needed, right? The only creative thing we are doing is to create these programs. And I suppose after some time, even that will be taken over by these programs themselves.
Yeah, but one thing I want to tell our listeners is that this book, The 5 Tantras of Enterprise Agility, has been completely handcrafted, so to say, right?
Right. I want to tell you again, JV and Shiv, that if you want to write a book, write it now. Because in 20 years, 30 years, we'll all be dead. And by then, AI would have taken over writing of books. And who knows, maybe after 100 years from now, maybe there'll be no more authors. They'll all be programs, right? They'll all be systems writing books for people's entertainment, right? Therefore, putting a name to a book may no longer exist. ISBN numbers may no longer exist. Therefore, write it now so that you can finally leave your name on a book.
Interesting thought.
Yeah. So coming to that, so far we've been talking about the story of the book, and let's talk about story of people who influenced the book, or in other words, which was the character that you found most difficult writing, Paramu?
Okay, the character I found most difficult to write was Chitra, the CTO. I made her a taciturn person, right? Mainly because in my book, I think the most challenging task I faced was writing a chapter on technical skills and tools, etc. That is writing a chapter on that was the most challenging part I found. Many a time none of these tools or processes are actually matured enough. Right? There's not enough things in literature to actually fall back on to figure out what kind of tools and techniques and processes are being used for self-organization, for example, or for transformational leadership. Right? So that was the most difficult thing I found to actually write, and therefore the character who was actually mouthing those concepts was the most difficult to actually write about. So yeah, Chitra was the most difficult character.
JB, for you, which was your most favorite character?
I think I would go with Sudarshana, the CEO of the organization. She comes across as a very balanced, thoughtful leader who is able to inspire the leadership team. See, basically, she joins the organization, just a few months. When we talk about the book, she is actually taking over from an authoritative leader who actually started the Agile journey, and they were not really, progressing as well as they would have ideally liked to. So she joins the organization in a very challenging time. And within a few months, she's able to get the support of the entire leadership team and transform their thinking and the way they wanted to achieve the whole vision, right? So she's able to inspire her vision into the leadership team and get them kind of aligned to it and moving for that. So in that sense, I would actually classify her as a transformational leader. And we talk about transformational leadership in the book. And in some sense, she's an embodiment of a great transformational leader. And that's one of the things that I found very, very good from a character perspective.
Actually, I think we will probably go on and on talking about the book, but I think it is better for leaders or everyone to start reading the book. But having read that, we already mentioned that it's going to be fairly light reading of a heavy subject. What resources do you have in mind for someone who has finished reading the book and wants to get started quickly?
See, obviously, the book itself has a lot of useful practical inputs that people can use right away after reading the book. The Amber Signals is an excellent example. The epilogue presents a good summary of what to do, what to avoid, those kinds of things. So all those are very practical inputs that they can start implementing immediately. But there is a host of other things that we are looking at also, from keeping our readers engaged. We want to actually use our website to post a lot of interesting challenges and applications of many of the values that we talk about in the book, and help the readers go through them and apply those values to different situations that we are hoping to be able to communicate through our website. So we would urge our readers to keep visiting our website on an ongoing, on a continuous basis over the next several weeks to months. So they will get real value for reading the book and being able to apply them to their own context. And of course, there is also a thought about a follow-up book in terms of expanding on the framework that we are talking about, getting a more practical, down to earth, how to implement stuff kind of stuff with tools, techniques, dimensions and metrics and so on and so forth. Getting down to the nuts and bolts. I think that's another thing that we are thinking about seriously as a follow-up to this book. I think we have a lot of ideas to keep our readers engaged over the next at least 1 to 2 years to make sure that they get the best value out of working with PM Power in this way.
That's very nice to hear. And Paramu, I think you also were mentioning about some challenge of a self-assessment and in a fun way.
See, I think JV touched on this. Some of the things that we're going to try to put up on our website are things like, as JV said, some challenges, some challenge of the week, and things like that. But another thing that we also thinking of putting up is some kind of assessment that people can take when they come to our website. A person can answer 10 questions and figure out where they're standing on their agile internalization. It's a very simple questionnaire. Just say you agree or do not agree with 10 questions, and then you post it, and then you get a link where it will give you a report, right, saying where you stand on your agile implementation. So I think that's a fairly good follow-up tool for this book. remember the first book, the book on project management was based on a framework. Right? Now, based on the book, we want to create a framework, and then based on that, maybe write another book, which will be a more practical tool in a person's hand to actually implement and stay agile.
Yeah, I have only one option to respond to all this that you said, to say that I agree. You actually left out one important thing, that both of you have been contributing to blogs and chows, or the challenges of the week, which also have some of these themes discussed earlier, and I'm sure that you're going to continue doing that. And
Yes.
with that, I think we are just about time for this episode. I'm sure that we can have more conversations once the book is out, and we have more readers also who may want to share their experiences, ideas, and all that. And all the best for your book. And I'm sure that this is the seed that is going to initiate a lot of knowledge sharing and learning, co-learning related to enterprise agility. Thank you, JV. Thank you, Paramu.
Thank you, Shiv. It is great being here, and wish you all the best, Shiv.
Yep. Thank you, Shiv. Me too. It was a pleasure talking to you. And finally, happy reading to all the readers of our book. I think that's one thing that I want to wish all our readers.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Malavika for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.